Far beyond the last known charts, something old watched the colonial fleet. It did not watch with eyes. It watched with quiet machines, small as dust, that drifted in the dark between stars. They hid in the shadow of asteroids, inside thin clouds of ice, even inside the glow of distant gas. They listened to radio bursts. They counted engine pulses. They traced the path of every ship like a finger drawing lines in the air. The observers were not silent. They were not human. They were a race that had been studying space for so long that they no longer believed in surprises. They believed everything could be reduced to patterns. Fear, hunger, hope, anger, those were numbers to them. Choice was only an illusion, they told each other. If you knew enough, you could predict anything. When the fleet appeared, broken and running, the observers felt a calm interest. A Battlestar, old but still strong, protecting a trail of civilian ships. Families packed into metal boxes. Fuel low. Food low. Sleep low. There were cries in the airwaves and arguments on every channel. The observers made a simple mark in their records. This group will break. Not because of weapons. Not because of the silence. Because of fear. Their probes took more readings. The Battlestar called Galactica was the center. The humans treated it like a moving home, a shield, a law. If that ship weakened, the fleet would crumble. If the humans inside it lost order, panic would spread like fire. The observers focused on the human leader. Commander Robert Hayes. He was not old, but the weight on him made him look tired. His hair was turning gray at the sides. His face carried the look of a man who had stopped expecting good news. He walked the halls with fast steps and a straight back. When people saluted him, he returned it, but he did not smile much. The probes watched him in small moments. In the command room, he studied screens filled with numbers and dots. He listened to reports about fuel, air, food, damage, and fear. His voice stayed steady. Even when the news was bad, he spoke like the ship could handle it. But the observers did not believe in steady voices. They believed in limits. They believed stress would push a mind until it cracked. They made another note. Primary control unit, Hayes. Pressure needed, moderate. Time to collapse, short. On the other side of the ship, far from the command room, pilot Mark Wilson pulled on his flight suit. He was young enough that some people still called him kid, but he had already seen too many friends die. His hands shook a little when he tied his gloves. He hated that he still felt fear every time. He hated it even more that he had learned to live with it. He walked into the ready room where pilots sat under harsh lights. Some stared at the floor. Some joked too loudly. Some cleaned their sidearms even though there was nothing to shoot inside the ship. Mark sat down and checked his helmet. He pressed the straps and made sure the seal was clean. A pilot lived on small details. A weak strap could kill you as fast as a missile. He looked around and saw the same thing he always saw now, tired eyes, tight mouths, and the quiet question nobody asked out loud. How long can we keep running? Above them, the loudspeaker crackled. A voice called out orders for patrols. Mark heard his name and his stomach tightened. He stood up, tried to breathe slowly, and followed the others toward the launch deck. The observers listened to Mark's heartbeat through tiny sensors and recorded it. Fear response, clear. Decision-making, still functional. Social bonding, high. They did not understand why social bonding mattered. To them, a frightened creature ran alone. Or it obeyed a single leader like a machine. Humans they had read in old records were messy. Emotional. Easy to shake. They expected Mark's fear to weaken him. They were wrong, but they did not know it yet. In sickbay, medic Emily Carter cleaned blood from her hands. The water in the basin turned pink, then red, then brown. She tried not to look at it too long. She tried not to think about how the blood belonged to a man who had been laughing 10 minutes earlier. Emily moved from bed to bed. She checked bandages. She checked breathing. She spoke in a calm voice, even when her chest felt tight. It's going to be okay, she told a wounded deck worker. The worker nodded, but his eyes stayed wide. He kept turning his head as if expecting the walls to shake and split open. Emily gave him a small smile and adjusted his blanket. She wished she could promise more, but she had learned not to lie. Instead, she stayed present. She gave him a hand to hold when the pain got bad. She taught a young volunteer how to carry supplies without dropping them. She showed another volunteer how to clean a wound and watch for fever. Every hour brought more wounded, more tired faces, more fear. Yet people still helped each other. People still showed up. The observers watched Emily too. Caretaker unit, Carter. Fear level high. Output stable. Efficiency, increasing. They paused on that word. Increasing. In their experience, fear lowered output. It caused mistakes. It caused desertion. It caused collapse. Yet Emily's output was rising. She was not becoming careless. She was becoming focused. The observers did not like that. They zoomed their sensors out and watched the whole ship. Galactica was a world of metal and noise. Engines hummed. Doors hissed. Boots hit the deck in fast steps. The ship smelled like oil, sweat, and heated wires. It carried thousands of lives, and every life carried its own fear. And still the ship held together. Commander Hayes stood at a screen showing the fleet's position. The civilian ships were scattered, uneven, slow. Some were damaged. Some were old cargo ships never meant to run like this. Yet they stayed near Galactica like chicks under a mother bird. An officer approached Hayes and spoke in a low voice. "Commander, we picked up another burst. Silent scouts, maybe?" Hayes did not show shock. He did not slam his fist. He simply nodded. "Launch patrols," he said. "And tell the fleet to tighten formation. Keep the slower ships in the center." The officer hurried away. Hayes leaned closer to the screen and stared at the blinking dots. He knew every dot carried people who wanted to live. Some of those people blamed him for their fear. Some wanted him to be a hero. Some wanted him to be a wall that never cracked. He did not feel like a wall. He felt like a man standing in a storm, holding a rope that could snap any second. He thought of something his father used to say when Mark was still a child back on Caprica. "You don't control the storm. You control your hands." Hayes looked at his hands now. They were steady. Not because he was fearless, but because he refused to let fear drive. The observers listened to his breathing and made new notes. Resisting stress response. Self-control, unusually high. Probability of breakdown, delayed. They debated among themselves in signals too fast for human ears. "He is a strong control unit," one observer mind said. "Control will fail when systems fail," another replied. "Break the systems." A third answered with cold confidence. "The fleet is already broken. The Silence will finish the work. We are only here to confirm the pattern." They agreed to continue watching, but they also planned small tests. Not direct attacks. Not mercy. Just pressure. In the hangar, Mark climbed into his Viper. The canopy closed over him, sealing him into a small glass bubble. He heard his own breath loud in his helmet. He checked his instruments. He spoke a short prayer without even meaning to. Across the deck, other Vipers launched in bright blasts of light. Mark's Viper shook as it rose and shot into space. For a moment, space looked peaceful. Stars scattered like ice chips. The fleet glowed softly behind Galactica, small lights moving through blackness. Then a warning sounded in Mark's headset. A sharp beep, then a voice. "Contact. Possible Cylon raiders." Mark's hands tightened on the controls. He saw them, dark shapes far away moving fast. He did not know that alien probes were watching this exact moment with intense interest. He did not know that, to those observers, this was a simple math problem. Add fear. Watch collapse. Mark did not collapse. He spoke into the radio, voice steady. "This is Mark. I'm moving to intercept. Stay close. Cover each other." Other pilots answered. Their voices were tired but alive. They formed up without being told twice. They moved like people who had learned what mattered. Back on Galactica, Emily heard the alert and felt the familiar drop in her stomach. She did not freeze. She did not cry. She called for more medical supplies. She told the volunteers what to do. She braced for incoming wounded because fear did not stop her hands. Commander Hayes watched the tactical display. He saw the first tracks of enemy contacts. He did not shout. He did not blame anyone. He gave clear orders and trusted his crew to carry them out. The observers listened to the ship's internal channels and waited for the moment when voices would turn wild, when arguments would break into screams, when people would run in all directions. They waited. Instead, they heard people doing their jobs. They heard a deck chief snapping, "Move it! Clear the line." They heard a pilot laughing nervously and saying, "Let's bring everyone home." They heard a medic telling a volunteer, "Look at me. Breathe. Now help me." They heard a commander saying, "We are not done yet." The alien observers were silent for a long time. Their prediction was not failing completely. Humans were still afraid. Humans were still stretched thin. The fleet was still close to breaking. But something was wrong with the simple model. Fear was supposed to be a chain around the mind. Yet in humans, fear was sometimes a spark. And the observers, ancient and confident, did not yet understand what that meant. The changes did not come all at once. At first, they were small enough to explain away. A fuel shipment arrived late, even though the route was clear. A scout patrol reported signals that vanished when checked again. A civilian ship drifted off course for a few minutes before correcting itself. Each problem had a reason, or at least a possible one. On Galactica, people were tired, systems were old, and space was dangerous. No one expected perfection. The alien observers watched closely. They had decided not to strike directly. Direct force caused chaos, but it also caused unity. History showed that weaker species often pulled together when hit hard. The observers preferred something cleaner. Something quieter. Pressure without a clear source. They adjusted the probes. Tiny pulses of energy brushed long-range sensors. Short delays were added to data streams. Signals were bent just enough to look real but arrive slightly wrong. Nothing that would be noticed right away. The goal was simple. Confusion leads to doubt. Doubt leads to fear. Fear leads to collapse. The Cylons, unaware they were being used, began to appear in strange patterns. Instead of attacking in force, they showed up in places that made no sense. A single raider near a mining route. A small group far from any important target. Then nothing for days. On the command deck, Commander Robert Hayes stared at the tactical map. "This doesn't fit," he said quietly. An officer shifted beside him. "Could be a trap, sir. Or bad intel." Hayes nodded. "Or both." The observers expected him to freeze. To demand perfect information before acting. Many leaders did. Hayes did not. "Pull patrols back closer to the fleet," he said. "We'll protect what we have instead of chasing ghosts." The order went out. Some officers questioned it. Others agreed. There was a short argument on a private channel. Voices rose then settled. The decision stood. The observers marked this as a deviation. Human response. Incomplete data accepted. Action taken anyway. In the engine sections, Technician Alan Brooks crawled through a narrow maintenance tunnel. His shoulders scraped metal and grease stained his uniform. A flickering panel light buzzed above him like an angry insect. "Come on," he muttered, tapping the panel with a wrench. The system should not have been failing. On paper it was fine. The manual showed no problem. Yet power kept dropping for half a second at random times, just long enough to cause trouble. Alan did not trust the manual. He opened a side panel that no one touched unless things were desperate. Inside, wires were bundled in a way that made sense to engineers long dead. Alan stared at it then shook his head. "This is stupid," he said to no one. He rerouted a cable, added a manual bypass and tied it down with a strip cut from an old glove. It was not clean. It was not approved. It worked. The lights steadied. The hum of the ship evened out. Alan wiped sweat from his face and smiled just a little. Elsewhere, an alarm sounded as a supply ship reported a navigation error. The ship was drifting toward a debris field, its charts insisting the path was clear. Navigator Laura Green stood at her station, eyes moving between screens. "The charts say we're safe," an officer said. Laura frowned. "My gut says we're not." The observers leaned in. Gut decisions were unreliable. Instinct was just noise. Laura zoomed out the display and watched how the stars shifted as the ship moved. She noticed a faint distortion, barely visible. "That's wrong," she said. "There's mass there. Something big." The officer hesitated. "It's not on the map." "Maps can be wrong," Laura said. "Space doesn't care about our maps." She changed course by a small amount. Just enough. Moments later, a cloud of wreckage slid past where the ship would have been. Twisted metal, old explosions frozen in silence. On the alien displays, probability lines split and rejoined in messy ways. Prediction error increased. They increased the pressure. False distress calls echoed through space. Some were real. Some were not. The signals overlapped, tangled, and cut out mid-message. The fleet could not respond to all of them. On Galactica, arguments broke out. "We can't ignore them," one officer said. "Those are people." "We can't chase every signal," another replied. "It could be a trap." Voices rose. Hands pointed. Fear pressed in from all sides. The observers waited for the breaking point. Instead, Commander Hayes raised his hand. "We do what we can," he said. "But we do it together. Split our efforts. No one goes alone." It was not a perfect solution. It was not safe. It was human. Mark Wilson flew escort for a small group sent to check one of the signals. He hated the waiting more than the fighting. His eyes flicked across empty space, searching for movement. "This feels wrong," he said over the radio. "Everything feels wrong lately," another pilot answered. They laughed, short and tense. When the signal faded, Mark cursed under his breath. It had been false. A trick of noise and delay. Back on Galactica, Emily Carter felt the strain in sickbay. Fewer supplies arrived on time. Equipment failed at bad moments. Volunteers made mistakes because they were tired and scared. Emily stopped trying to do everything herself. "Listen," she told them. "We will mess up. That's okay. We fix it together." She paired experienced hands with new ones. She showed people how to improvise when tools failed. She praised effort, not perfection. The observers recorded her behavior with confusion. Leadership without hierarchy. Training during crisis. Morale increasing under stress. Their models began to drift. Data points no longer lined up cleanly. Predictions needed more exceptions. The clean lines of control blurred into tangled shapes. One observer mind suggested a correction. Human error is masking collapse. Increase test intensity. Another disagreed. Collapse should already be visible. Why is output stable? A third observer paused longer than the rest. They are not following single paths, it signaled. They change paths mid-movement. On Galactica, Alan Brooks was called to fix another problem. This time, a sensor array showed phantom contacts that vanished when approached. "It's not broken," Alan said after a quick check. "It's confused." "That's not helpful," an officer replied. Alan shrugged. "Neither is lying to the system. It's getting bad data. We need to filter it." "But the filter rules don't match reality anymore," Alan finished. He wrote a new filter by hand, adjusting values until the noise faded. Real contacts stayed. False ones dropped away. The system was no longer perfect. It was better. Laura Green updated her charts, but she also started writing notes in the margins. Not numbers. Feelings. Patterns she noticed after long hours watching stars slide by. "This region feels unstable," she wrote once. "Trust scans, but trust yourself too." The observers saw this and flagged it as irrational behavior. Yet survival rates ticked upward. Supply ships still failed, but crews adapted. They shared fuel. They rerouted cargo. They made hard choices and lived with them. Arguments still happened. Fear still existed. But fear did not rule. The alien observers pulled back and reviewed their models. Fear was present. Loss was present. Confusion was present. Collapse was not. Instead, something else was happening. The humans were bending instead of breaking. They were using disagreement as a tool. They were accepting incomplete answers and moving anyway. The observers marked the file with a new note. System instability increasing. "'Cause unknown." They had come to confirm control. Instead, they were watching it slip through their grasp, one small human choice at a time. The attack came without warning. One moment, the fleet moved through open space in careful formation. The next, alarms screamed across Galactica. Red lights flashed. The ship shook as explosions hit the outer hull. Silent raiders poured in from multiple directions, faster and heavier than before. Missiles struck armor plates already worn thin. Power flickered. Screens went dark, then returned with broken images. On the command deck, Commander Robert Hayes gripped the edge of his console as the floor tilted. "Damage report," he shouted. Static answered him. Some channels were dead. Others overlapped with noise and half-words. Orders went out, but many never reached their targets. The command system that held the ship together began to tear apart. Deep in space, the alien observers watched closely. This was the moment they had waited for. A large battle. Heavy damage. Broken command. Now the collapse. On the launch deck, Mark Wilson felt his Viper slam forward as the catapult fired him into space. His screen flashed warnings before settling into a mess of symbols and gaps. "Control, this is Mark," he said. "I've lost half my display." No answer. Around him, other Vipers scattered as explosions bloomed in the dark. Silence streaked past, red lights burning like angry eyes. Mark's radio crackled with fragments. "Can't see. Engines? On your left." There was no clear voice. No calm order telling him where to go or what to do. For half a second, fear grabbed him hard. Then he saw another Viper spin out of control, smoke trailing from its side. "Hang on," Mark said, though he didn't know if the pilot could hear him. He swung his Viper into position, firing at a Cylon that was lining up a kill shot. The enemy ship exploded into fragments. Another human pilot slid in beside Mark without a word. They moved together, covering each other, reacting to motion instead of orders. Mark realized something important. Everyone was still fighting. Just not waiting. Across the battle space, small groups of pilots formed and broke apart as needed. One pilot ran low on fuel, and another shielded him during retreat. A damaged Viper was guided back by hand signals and short radio bursts. No one was in charge. And somehow it worked. The alien observers recorded rapidly. Command failure, total. Expected outcome, panic, disorganization, loss. Observed outcome, decentralized coordination. Probability error, extreme. On Galactica the damage was worse. A blast tore through a lower deck, throwing crew members against the walls. Fire spread through a corridor until emergency doors slammed shut. Power failed in sections, leaving only dim backup lights. Emily Carter was thrown to the floor in sickbay. She hit hard, pain shooting through her shoulder. She stayed down for a breath, then pushed herself up. "Everyone stay calm," she called out. The lights flickered again. A man cried out as a stretcher tipped over. Emily moved fast. She checked herself quickly, ignored the pain, and grabbed the nearest patient before the next shock hit. More wounded arrived within minutes. Soldiers, pilots, deck workers. Some walked in on their own. Others were carried by friends or strangers. Medical staff were not enough. Emily saw that at once. She turned to a group of civilians who stood frozen near the door. "You," she said, pointing. "I need help. Now." They stared at her, eyes wide. "I don't know how," one said. "That's fine," Emily replied. "I'll show you." She placed hands where they needed to be. She spoke slowly and clearly. "Hold pressure here. Watch his breathing. If he stops talking, tell me." Fear filled the room, but it did not stop movement. People learned as they worked. They passed supplies. They followed instructions. Some cried while helping. Some shook. They still helped. Elsewhere, crew members acted without waiting for rank or permission. A junior technician shut down a damaged system before it exploded, even though it was not his call. A deck officer rerouted power through a risky path because it was the only option. Arguments happened, quick and sharp. "Are you sure?" "No, but we don't have time." Then action. Commander Hayes tried to reach key stations, but too many channels were dead. For the first time since the flight began, he could not see the full picture. He felt the weight of it settle on him. Control was gone. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them. "Keep the ship alive," he said to anyone who could hear him. "Do what you think is right." It was not a perfect order. It was an honest one. The alien observers froze on that transmission. Leader releases control. Expectation, collapse accelerates. Instead, systems stabilized in uneven ways. Not clean. Not perfect. But alive. In space, Mark's fuel warning blinked. His weapons were low. His hands ached from gripping the controls. "Anyone need cover?" he asked over an open channel. A voice answered, strained. "I'm hit. Can't shake them." Mark turned without thinking. He saw the damaged Viper limping away, two Cylons closing in. He fired, drawing their attention. Another pilot joined him. Then another. They did not speak much. They did not need to. When the Cylons broke off, the damaged Viper drifted toward Galactica, safe for now. Mark let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Around him the battle shifted. Cylons pressed in, then pulled back. The humans did not chase blindly. They protected what mattered. The alien observers adjusted their models again and again. No central control. No fixed pattern. Adaptive clusters forming and dissolving. "This is inefficient," one observer mind signaled. "Yet effective," another replied. Losses were real. Ships were destroyed. People died. The fleet was wounded. But it did not fall apart. On Galactica, fires were contained. Power returned in patches. Emergency teams formed and reformed as needed. Emily moved through sickbay, voice hoarse, hands steady. She taught a young man how to stitch a wound. She showed a woman how to calm someone in shock. She made hard choices and lived with them. At one point, she leaned against a wall, dizzy, then pushed off again when someone called her name. Far above, Commander Hayes watched the status lights slowly change from red to yellow. Not good, but better. He realized something with a mix of fear and pride. The ship was running without him. Not because he failed. Because people stepped up. The alien observers went quiet. Their predictions no longer made sense. Fear did not cause collapse. Broken command did not cause chaos. Loss did not stop cooperation. Humans were not acting like machines. They were not acting like controlled systems. They were choosing. As the Cylons finally withdrew, leaving wreckage and silence behind, the observers marked the battle as a critical failure of their models. Human behavior, non-deterministic. Response to loss of control, cooperative autonomy. Prediction reliability, unacceptable. For the first time in a very long time, the observers felt something close to uncertainty. On Galactica, Mark guided his damaged Viper back to the hangar. Emily sat down for the first time in hours. Commander Hayes stood quietly listening to the ship breathe. The fleet was hurt, but it was alive. And that, the aliens were beginning to understand, changed everything. The days after the battle felt heavier than the fight itself. Ships were gone. Names were spoken in quiet voices. Empty bunks stayed empty. The fleet moved on, slower now, carrying loss like extra weight. Fear spread through the ships, not as panic, but as a steady presence that never fully left. People slept less. They argued more. Small problems felt big. The alien observers watched and waited. This was the time when grief usually finished what battle began. When tired minds made bad choices. When trust broke under blame. The observers marked rising stress levels and predicted delayed collapse. On Galactica, Commander Robert Hayes read reports late into the night. His eyes burned. His head hurt. The old way, tight control, clear chains, strict orders, no longer fit what he saw. The ship was surviving in pieces, not as a single machine. He made a choice. At the next briefing he spoke plainly. "I don't have all the answers," he said. "And I won't pretend I do. If you see a better way to do something, speak up. If you need to act fast, act. We fix mistakes together." Some officers looked unsure. Others nodded with relief. This was not how things were supposed to work. But things were not normal. Across the ship, people began to share more than just orders. Mechanics showed pilots how to read damage reports. Pilots explained combat patterns to deck crews. Medics taught civilians basic care so sickbay would not drown. Emily Carter stood in a crowded corridor, teaching a group how to stop bleeding with simple tools. "You won't do it perfectly," she said. "That's fine. Doing something is better than doing nothing." Fear was still there. And still shook. But people felt less helpless. Alan Brooks worked with a team that did not exist on any chart. A junior officer, 2 civilians, and a cook helped him rebuild a power relay using parts from 3 different systems. "This should not work," the officer said. Alan smiled tiredly. "It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to hold." It held. The alien observers watched these changes with growing tension. Hierarchy weakening. Authority distributed. Error tolerance increasing. Their models did not like this. Systems without strict control should fail faster, not slower. They argued among themselves. "Human behavior is inefficient," one observer mind said. "Too much debate. Too many choices." "Yet survival continues," another replied. "Our assumptions may be flawed." "Flawed?" a third signaled sharply. "Control is the only path to stability." While the observers debated, they made a decision. One more test. This time they interfered directly. A cluster of probes sent a strong signal burst toward the fleet. Navigation data twisted. Sensors showed false gravity wells and moving hazards. The goal was to force a single bad choice. On Galactica, alarms sounded again. Navigator Laura Green stared at her screens as space bent in strange ways. "This doesn't make sense," she said. Everything just shifted. Commander Hayes felt the familiar pull to take over, to demand answers, to lock down decisions. He stopped himself. "What do you think?" he asked. Laura swallowed. "I think the data is lying. But not all of it. We need to cross-check with visual patterns." "Do it," Hayes said. Other voices joined in. "Engines can handle a short jump. We can't move the whole fleet at once. Split the formation. Stagger the turns." Arguments filled the room. Ideas collided. Some were wrong. Some were risky. No single voice won. They built a plan from pieces. In space, pilots flew ahead to test paths. Mark Wilson was among them. He knew the readings were bad, but he trusted the people behind him. "If this goes wrong," he said over the radio, "turn back. Don't follow blindly." He flew by sight, by instinct, by small changes in star movement that Laura had taught him to notice. One path collapsed into a false well. Mark pulled away just in time. "That one's bad," he said calmly. "Try left." Behind him the fleet adjusted. Not perfectly, but enough. The alien observers reacted with alarm. Prediction collapse detected. Human adaptation rate increasing. They pushed harder. Signals shifted again. Data changed mid-action. Instead of freezing, the humans adapted faster. Data changed, someone called. Then ignore it. Trust the scouts. Emily Carter felt the effects in sickbay as engines strained and people were thrown against walls. New injuries arrived. She did not wait for orders. She pointed. She delegated. She trusted people to do their best. Mistakes happened. A wound was wrapped wrong and had to be redone. A system was shut down too early and caused a delay. No one was punished. They corrected and moved on. The observers watched the fleet survive a situation designed to break decision-making systems. This was not possible under their rules. Their technology relied on prediction, perfect planning, systems that removed choice and replaced it with certainty. Humans did the opposite. They accepted uncertainty. They argued. They changed plans mid-action. They allowed mistakes. And they lived. The observers' internal debate turned sharp. "We cannot control this species," one mind signaled. "Then withdraw," another replied. "Mark them unstable." A third observer sent a final note, slower than the rest. "Not unstable. Adaptive." The fleet emerged from the interference battered but intact. Navigation settled. Sensors cleared. Space returned to its quiet indifference. On Galactica, Commander Hayes sat alone for a moment after the crisis passed. He felt older. He also felt lighter. Control was no longer something he held alone. It was something shared. The alien observers pulled back their probes slightly, not retreating yet, but watching with new caution. They had interfered once more. And instead of breaking the humans, they had made them harder to predict than ever. For a species built on control, that was the most dangerous outcome of all. Far beyond the reach of human sensors, the alien observers made their final decision. Their probes drifted in silence as data streams slowed and then stopped. Records were reviewed one last time. Lines of prediction crossed and broke, forming shapes that no longer made sense. The clean logic that had guided the observers for ages failed again and again when applied to humans. They sealed the file. Species, human. Status, dangerous variable. Not dangerous because of weapons. Not dangerous because of numbers. Dangerous because of choice. One observer paused longer than the others, scanning the last moments of the fleet. Humans repairing damaged ships. Humans sharing food. Humans laughing softly after loss. "This species does not obey pressure," it signaled. "They transform under it." The probes pulled away. Power faded. Silent machines slipped back into the dark between stars, carrying sealed records that would not be opened again for a very long time. The humans never noticed. On Battlestar Galactica, life moved forward in small, quiet ways. Repairs continued. Schedules changed. Names of the lost were spoken during short ceremonies, then carried in memory. Emily Carter stood near an observation window at the edge of the ship. The stars drifted slowly past, cold and distant. She held a cup of water she had forgotten to drink. For the first time in days there were no alarms. Her body felt heavy. Her hands still remembered pain, heat, and blood. She thought of the people she had helped. She also thought of the ones she could not save. Behind her, footsteps approached. "You should rest," a voice said gently. Emily nodded but did not turn. In a minute, the fleet glided through space in a loose formation. Ships of many shapes and sizes followed Galactica's steady path. Some were patched with mismatched metal. Some still bore scorch marks from battle. They were not perfect. They were alive. Emily thought about how close everything had come to ending. How many times fear had filled the air. How often people had acted without knowing if it was the right choice. And yet they were still here. On the command deck, Commander Robert Hayes reviewed reports with tired eyes. Losses were heavy. Supplies were thin. The future was still unknown. But something had changed. The crew no longer waited for perfect orders. They brought ideas. They spoke openly. They disagreed without breaking apart. Hayes listened more than he spoke now. He understood something he had not before. Control was not about holding tight. It was about letting go at the right time. In the hangar, Mark Wilson walked past rows of Vipers, some damaged, some newly repaired. He ran a hand along the side of his fighter, feeling the cold metal under his fingers. He thought about the battle. About flying without orders. About trusting others to do the same. He had been scared. He still was. But fear no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a signal. A warning that reminded him to look around, to pay attention, to care. He climbed into his Viper for a routine patrol. As the launch system powered up, he smiled faintly. "Let's keep moving," he said to himself. In the lower decks, Alan Brooks wiped grease from his hands and laughed quietly as the system finally stabilized. "Good enough," he said. Laura Green updated navigation charts, then closed them and stared at the stars directly. "Maps help," she whispered. "But they're not everything." Across the ship, people rested, worked, argued, learned, and hoped. No one spoke of alien observers. No one knew how close the fleet had come to being erased by careful hands that believed choice was a flaw. The fleet jumped again, vanishing in a flash of light. Far away, in a region of space untouched by human travel, The sealed alien records remained still. No new data entered. No corrections were made. The final note stood unchanged. Humanity survives because it does not follow fixed paths. It survives because it accepts uncertainty. It survives because individuals choose and others choose to stand with them. On Galactica, Emily Carter finally turned away from the stars. She took a slow breath and walked back into the ship, back into noise, back into life. The fleet moved on. No one was fully in control. And because of that, humanity endured.